They say an Omega's kiss can't break curses. They say we're too weak, too broken, too worthless to wield real power. They were wrong. My name is Charlotte, and 3 months ago, I was the most pathetic wolf in the Moonvale pack, the forgotten daughter, the unwanted stepsister, the Omega everyone loved to torture because I couldn't fight back. 3 months ago, I was cleaning windows while the Alpha King visited, trying to stay invisible because that's what Omegas do. We survive by disappearing. Now I'm carrying his child, wearing a crown, and armies are gathering at my borders because they're terrified of what my baby might become. You want to know how a powerless Omega became the most dangerous woman in the werewolf realm? How one kiss shattered a 20-year curse that had killed every woman who tried to claim the Alpha King's heart? Before we dive in, if this is your first time listening to one of our audiobooks, hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. Stick around until the very end of the video and let me know where in the world you're listening from. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Omega. Charlotte pressed her face against the cold stone wall as Abigail's laughter echoed down the servants' corridor. The bruise on her ribs throbbed with each breath, a fresh reminder that being the pack's weakest Omega meant existing as everyone's favorite target. "Did you really think you could sneak into the kitchen without us noticing?" Abigail's voice dripped with malice as she cornered Charlotte in the narrow hallway. Behind her, Mila crossed her arms, her future Luna status making her cruelty feel official. "I was just..." Charlotte's words died as Abigail's hand shot out, shoving her harder against the wall. "You were just what? Stealing food meant for real wolves?" Mila stepped closer, her perfectly manicured claws extending slightly. "You know the rules, Charlotte. Omegas eat scraps, after everyone else." Charlotte's stomach cramped with hunger. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, not since they'd forgotten to save her any leftovers from the last pack feast. But arguing would only make it worse. "Leave her alone," Lucy's voice cut through the tension as she appeared at the end of the corridor, her healer's robes giving her just enough authority to make the others pause. Abigail rolled her eyes. "Mind your own business, Lucy. This doesn't concern you." "Everything concerning pack welfare concerns me," Lucy said firmly, though she could see the fear flickering in her friend's eyes. Even Lucy, with her respected position, couldn't completely protect her from the pack's hierarchy. Mila's lips curved into a cold smile. How sweet. The healer thinks she can protect the runt. She leaned closer to Charlotte, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But she won't always be around, will she?" They left her there, shaking against the wall, their laughter fading down the corridor. Lucy rushed to her side, gentle hands checking for new injuries. "You can't keep letting them do this to you," Lucy murmured, though they both knew Charlotte had no choice. And the Moonvale pack might made right, and Charlotte had neither might nor right. "It doesn't matter," Charlotte whispered, though the words tasted like ash. "I'm nothing. I'll always be nothing." Lucy's hand stilled. "Don't say that. Your parents." "My parents are dead." The words came out sharper than intended, and whatever they were, it died with them. But even as she said it, Charlotte felt that strange stirring in her chest again, the same sensation that came during the full moon, like something powerful trying to claw its way out of her skin. She pushed it down, as always. Omegas didn't have power. Omegas survived by staying invisible. The Moon Festival arrived 3 days later, transforming the pack grounds into a spectacle of silver banners and glowing torches. Charlotte watched from the servants' quarters as wolves dressed in their finest clothing, their excitement electric in the night air. The Alpha King himself would be attending, a rare honor that had the entire pack buzzing with nervous energy. "You're not seriously thinking of going, are you?"
Lucy asked, finding Charlotte staring out the small window. Charlotte shook her head. I know my place. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The celebration was in full swing when the commotion started. Charlotte had been cleaning the great hall's upper windows, a task deliberately assigned to keep her out of sight, when she heard Abigail's voice rise above the music. She's here! The little spy! Charlotte's blood ran cold. Through the window, she could see Abigail pointing directly at her, Mila beside her with a triumphant grin. Hiding up there like a rat, Mila called out, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet courtyard. Come down, Charlotte. Come meet your Alpha King. No, Charlotte breathed, but it was too late. Pack members were already moving toward the building, their faces a mixture of curiosity and cruel entertainment. She tried to run, but Hudson, the pack's beta, was already climbing the stairs. His expression wasn't readable as he approached her, but his grip on her arm was firm. The Alpha King wants to see all pack members. That includes you. Charlotte's legs felt like water as Hudson guided her down the stairs and out into the courtyard. The crowd parted as they moved toward the center, where a makeshift throne had been erected. And sitting on that throne, Charlotte's world stopped.
Alpha King Elijah was nothing like the stories. Where she'd expected a monster, she found a man whose presence seemed to consume all the air in the courtyard. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that looked carved from granite and shadow. Power radiated from him in waves, making every wolf in the vicinity bow their heads in submission. Everyone except Charlotte. She couldn't look away, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And when his eyes, those impossibly dark eyes, met hers across the courtyard, she felt something inside her chest crack wide open. Elijah's hands gripped the arms of his throne so tightly, the wood groaned. His carefully controlled expression flickered, just for a moment, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. "Bring her forward," he commanded, his voice rough like gravel. Charlotte's feet moved without her permission, Hudson's hand still on her arm, guiding her through the crowd. She could feel every eye on her, could hear the whispers starting, but all she could focus on was the Alpha King's gaze burning into her soul. 20 feet away, 10, 5. Hudson released her arm and stepped back, leaving her standing alone before the most powerful werewolf in existence. Elijah rose from his throne slowly, like a predator deciding whether to strike. His chest rose and fell with carefully controlled breaths. And Charlotte could swear she saw his hands trembling. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Charlotte," she managed, her own voice cracking. Something flickered across his face. Recognition? Relief? Fear? The air around them began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Pack members started backing away, their faces filled with confusion and growing alarm. Elijah took a step toward her, then another, his iron control cracking with each movement. "Impossible," he breathed, and Charlotte realized with dawning horror that whatever was happening between them, whatever this connection was, it was about to change everything. The curse that had plagued the Alpha King for decades, the curse that had killed every potential mate, began to unravel in the space between their locked gazes. And Charlotte, the forgotten Omega, found herself standing at the center of a storm that would either destroy them both or forge a bond that could shake the very foundations of the werewolf world. Chapter 2: The Alpha King's Curse. The forgotten Omega stood frozen before him, and Elijah felt his world tilting on its axis. For the first time in 20 years, the constant burning in his chest had stopped. The curse that had haunted him since his 18th birthday, the curse that turned every potential mate bond into a death sentence, had gone completely silent. No searing pain, no voices screaming warnings in his head, just peace. And that terrified him more than any battle he'd ever fought. "My king!" Hudson's voice cut through the stunned silence of the courtyard, sharp with warning. "Perhaps we should—" "No." Elijah's command silenced his beta instantly. His eyes never left Charlotte's face, drinking in every detail. The way her dark hair caught the moonlight, the pulse hammering in her throat, the strange otherworldly calm that seemed to radiate from her despite her obvious fear. She was nothing like the she-wolves who had died before. No political connections, no powerful bloodlines, no stunning beauty that could stop wars. Just a small, trembling Omega who looked like she'd spent her life apologizing for existing. So why did looking at her feel like coming home? "Charlotte." He said her name like a prayer, testing how it felt on his tongue. She flinched, probably expecting cruelty. Everyone always expected cruelty from him. "Your Majesty," Henry's weathered voice carried across the courtyard as the elderly council member pushed through the crowd. "With respect, this is highly irregular. Protocol demands—" "Protocol?" Elijah's laugh held no humor. "When has protocol ever served me well, Henry?" The elder's face darkened with memory. They all remembered. Lydia, the first, dead within minutes of their mating bite, blood foam on her lips. Then Sarah, lasting barely an hour before the curse claimed her. And finally Rebecca, the beta's daughter, who had begged him to try despite the warnings, only to die screaming in his arms. 3 beautiful, strong she-wolves, 3 funerals, 3 reasons why he'd sworn never to risk another life. "The curse," Henry began, "is quiet," Elijah finished, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "For the first time in 2 decades, it's completely quiet."
Gasps rippled through the crowd. Pack members who had lived through his previous attempts stepped back further, their faces pale with fear and fascination. Charlotte's eyes widened. Curse? The innocent confusion in her voice hit him like a physical blow. Of course she wouldn't know. Omegas weren't told the stories that kept other she-wolves away from him. She had no idea she was standing in the presence of death itself. "Every potential mate I've touched has died," he said simply, watching her face for the inevitable terror, the desperate scramble to escape. Instead, Charlotte tilted her head slightly, studying him with those strange, too knowing eyes. "That must be very lonely," she said quietly. The words hit him harder than any blow ever had. Not fear, not horror, compassion. When was the last time anyone had looked at him with compassion? Hudson moved closer, his body tense with protective instincts. "My king, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No." Elijah took another step toward Charlotte. Close enough now that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "I need to know." "Know what?" she whispered. "If you're real, if this silence means what I think it means." He lifted his hand slowly, giving her every chance to run. "I need to touch you." The crowd held its collective breath. Henry was shaking his head frantically, while Hudson's hand moved his weapon. Even the Omega's friend, Lucy, wasn't it, looked ready to throw herself between them. But Charlotte didn't move. "Will it hurt you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear he could smell rolling off her in waves. "It should kill you," he answered honestly. "It's killed everyone else." She considered this, her gaze never leaving his. Then, in a move that defied every survival instinct she should have possessed, Charlotte lifted her own hand. "Then we'll find out together." Their fingers touched, and the world exploded. Not with pain, with a light. Pure, brilliant light that seemed to pour from the point where their skin met. Charlotte gasped but didn't pull away, even as power crackled between them like lightning. Elijah felt the curse shatter. 20 years of torment, 20 years of isolation, 20 years of death following in his wake. Gone in an instant. The burning in his chest transformed into something else entirely, something warm and whole and right. The light faded, leaving them both swaying but alive, very much alive. Impossible, Henry breathed, his voice shaking. But Hudson was already moving, his strategic mind calculating threats and possibilities. The entire pack witnessed this. Word will spread beyond our borders within hours. Elijah barely heard him. Charlotte's hand was still in his, warm and real and miraculous. Her pulse was racing, but she was breathing, standing, living. "How?" he whispered. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I've never known why I was different." Different. The word caught his attention, pulling him back to the present danger. If she was different, if she carried some power that could break ancient curses, then she was valuable, and valuable things attracted predators. "My king," Hudson's voice carried new urgency. "The council needs to convene immediately if she's truly immune to the curse." "Then she needs to be tested properly," Henry interrupted, his scholarly mind already working. "Before the entire pack, before any formal claims can be made." "Tested how?" Charlotte asked, though something in her voice suggested she already knew. Henry's eyes gleamed with the fervor of a man who'd spent his life studying ancient laws. "The traditional way, the only way that proves beyond doubt that the curse is truly broken." Elijah felt his jaw clench. "No." "The mating kiss," Henry continued as if he hadn't spoken, "performed before witnesses with the full power of the Pak bond behind it. If she survives that, then your majesty will have found your true mate." The crowd erupted into whispers, some excited, some terrified, all fascinated by the prospect of witnessing either a miracle or a tragedy. Charlotte's hand tightened in his. "And if I don't survive, then you die as the others did," Henry said bluntly, "but at least we'll know the truth." Elijah started to speak, to reject the whole insane proposal, but Charlotte's voice cut through his protests. "When?" "Charlotte, no," he said sharply. "I won't risk." "When?" she repeated, her eyes meeting his with startling determination. Henry smiled, the expression cold and calculating. "Dawn, before the entire pack. If you truly believe she's your mate, your majesty, then you'll have no problem proving it." The challenge was clear, the trap expertly laid. Refuse, and he'd look weak, uncertain. Accept, and he might watch another innocent die in his arms. But as Charlotte squeezed his hand, as he felt the continued silence of the curse that had ruled his life for so long, Elijah realized he didn't have a choice. Some risks were worth taking, even if they destroyed you. Chapter 3. The Kiss That Shattered Fate. Dawn broke over the pack grounds like a blade cutting through darkness, and Charlotte felt every eye in the territory boring into her as she stood before the Alpha King. She hadn't slept. How could she? Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd seen the faces of the 3 she-wolves who had died in Elijah's arms. Lydia, Sarah, Rebecca. Their names whispered through the pack like a prayer for the dead. Now, she might join them. "Last chance to run," Lucy had whispered as she'd helped Charlotte dress in the simple white gown tradition demanded. "No one would blame you." But Charlotte hadn't run, couldn't run. Something deeper than logic, deeper than fear, kept pulling her toward this moment, toward him. Elisha stood 20 feet away, his face a mask of controlled anguish. He'd been fighting the council all night. She could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Hudson flanked him, worry etched into every line of his loyal face, while Henry watched from the elevated platform with the cold satisfaction of a man who believed he was about to be proven right. The entire pack had gathered in the great courtyard, hundreds of wolves forming a perfect circle around them. Charlotte could smell their emotions: excitement, fear, bloodlust, pity. Even Abigail and Mila were there, their faces bright with cruel anticipation. But it was the stranger who caught her attention, a tall, dark-haired man she'd never seen before, standing with a small group of unfamiliar wolves near the eastern entrance. His eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl, and when he smiled, she saw too many teeth. "Who is that?" she whispered to Lucy, who had been permitted to stay close as pack healer. Lucy followed her gaze and paled. Mateo, alpha of the Shadow Thing pack. What's he doing here? Before Charlotte could ask more questions, Henry's voice boomed across the courtyard. "By ancient law and sacred tradition, we gathered to witness the testing of a potential mating nod. Alpha King Elijah of Crescent Dominion will attempt the mating kiss with the Omega Charlotte of Moonville Pack." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some prayers, some bets on how quickly she would die. "If she lives," Henry continued, "the curse will be proven broken and she will be recognized as his true mate. If she dies," he let the words hang in the air like a blade. Elijah's eyes met hers across the distance, and she saw everything he couldn't say. His fear, his desperate hope, his absolute certainty that he was about to watch another innocent die because of him. "I'm sorry," he mouthed silently. Charlotte lifted her chin. If she was going to die, she'd do it with dignity. "I'm ready," she called out, her voice carrying farther than she'd expected. The crowd fell silent as Elijah began walking toward her. Each step seemed to echo like thunder, and Charlotte could feel the curse stirring in the air around them. Not the peaceful silence from yesterday, but something darker, angrier, a force that had been fed on death for 20 years and wasn't ready to give up its hold. 10 feet, 5, 3. He stopped just close enough to touch, his dark eyes searching her face. "Charlotte," he whispered, so quietly only she could hear. "If this goes wrong—" "It won't," she interrupted, though she had no idea where the certainty came from. "Trust me." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, relief, something that might have been love if they had time for such luxuries. "I do," he said simply. Then his hands were cupping her face, thumb tracing the line of her cheek with infinite gentleness. The curse roared to life around them, invisible to the watching crowd, but deafening to Charlotte's enhanced senses. Power lashed between them like chains of ice and fire, trying to tear them apart. "Now," Henry commanded. Elijah's mouth touched hers and the world exploded. This wasn't the gentle light from their first contact. This was war. 20 years of accumulated death and rage and twisted magic fought against something pure and ancient that lived in Charlotte's bloodline. The curse shrieked as it encountered power that predated its very existence, power that had been sleeping in her bloodline for generations. Light erupted from them in waves, so bright that wolves had to shield their eyes. Charlotte felt the curse trying to stop her heart, trying to boil her blood, trying to tear her soul from her body. Mateo's smile widened. Her grandmother was Shadowfang, made it out to strengthen ties between packs. But the bloodline remembers. She belongs with us, with me. Charlotte felt the blood drain from her face. Her grandmother, the woman her parents had never spoken of, the family history that had died with them? "You're lying," she whispered. Am I? Mateo pulled a scroll from his coat, the parchment yellow with age. Marriage contract, signed 60 years ago. Elena Blackthorn, daughter of Shadowfang, promised an alliance to Moonvale. Her granddaughter reverts to our pack upon manifestation of her power. The courtyard fell deathly silent. Even Henry looked shaken as he examined the document. This appears legitimate, the elder admitted reluctantly. No. Elijah's voice was deadly quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. She is my mate, my true mate, proven before witnesses. That supersedes any contract, any claim, any law you want to cite. The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Wolves gasped, whispered, stared in shock. The Alpha King had just claimed the pack's lowest Omega as his equal. Mateo's facade of civility finally cracked, revealing the predator beneath. You think your little display proves anything? She's a weapon, Elijah. A weapon that belongs to the strongest pack, and that isn't yours anymore. Want to test that theory? Elijah's eyes began to glow with wolf light, his power pressing against every wolf in the courtyard. But before Mateo could respond, Charlotte struggled to her feet, swaying slightly, but determined. The two alphas were squaring off like they were going to tear each other apart, and it was all because of her. Stop, she said quietly. Neither man heard her. Stop! This time her voice carried power, the same power that had broken the curse. Both alphas froze, their attention snapping to her. Charlotte looked between them, seeing the future spread out in terrible clarity. War, death, packs torn apart because of ancient grudges and older magic. And at the center of it all, her. I won't be the reason for bloodshed, she said firmly. I won't be a prize fought over like a piece of territory. Elijah's expression softened. Charlotte. But I also won't be claimed by contracts I never signed. She turned to face Mateo, drawing on reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed. You want me, then prove you're worthy. Not with old papers, but with honor. Mateo's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? Charlotte felt the words rise from somewhere deep inside her, as if her bloodline itself was speaking. Trial by combat. Your champion against his. She nodded toward Elijah. Winner takes all. The courtyard erupted in chaos. Wolves shouted, argued, demanded explanations. But through it all, Charlotte kept her eyes on Elijah, seeing the moment he understood what she was really doing. She wasn't just buying them time. She was forcing both packs to acknowledge her right to choose. Mateo's laugh cut through the noise like breaking glass. How wonderfully primitive. I accept. As do I, Elijah said immediately, though his eyes promised they would talk about this later. Excellent. Mateo's smile was pure perimeter now. 3 days to prepare, and when I win, his gaze settled on Charlotte with possessive heat. You'll come willingly to Shadowfang territory as my mate. The challenge was issued, the stakes were set, and Charlotte realized with growing dread that she might have just made the biggest mistake of her life. Chapter 4. Betrayal, Bond, and Blood. 3 days of being treated like a queen felt more like torture than triumph, and Charlotte was drowning in the suffocating weight of everyone's expectations. The Moonvale pack had transformed overnight. Wolves who had ignored her existence now bowed when she passed. The same servants who had denied her food now competed to serve her the finest meals. Even her quarters had changed, from the cramped servants' room to a lavish suite that felt more like a beautiful prison. But it was Elijah's behavior that confused her most. He was attentive, protective, everything a mate should be. Yet, something felt wrong. In quiet moments, when he thought she wasn't watching, she caught glimpses of something that looked almost like relief, as if claiming her had solved the problem rather than begun a love story. "You're brooding again," Lucy observed, setting down a tray of untouched breakfast. "You've barely eaten since the ceremony." Charlotte pushed away from the window where she'd been watching the warriors train for tomorrow's combat trial. "Do you think he loves me, Lucy, or does he just love being free of his curse?" Her hesitation was answer enough. "Charlotte, be honest with me," Charlotte interrupted. "You were there. You saw his face when the curse broke. What did you see?" Lucy sat heavily on the bed beside her. "I saw relief. And yes, I saw love. But which came first?" She shrugged helplessly. "I don't know." The admission hit like a physical blow. If Lucy, who knew her better than anyone, couldn't tell the difference, a sharp knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Without waiting for permission, Abigail swept into the room, her expression a perfect mask of sisterly concern. "Charlotte, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." The false warmth in her voice made Charlotte's skin crawl. "What do you want, Abigail?" "To apologize." Abigail's eyes glistened with what might have been tears if Charlotte hadn't known better. "All these years, I've been horrible to you. Jealous, cruel, but seeing you with the Alpha King, seeing your true worth," she dabbed at her eyes delicately. "I was hoping we could start over, as sisters should." Lucy made a skeptical sound, but Charlotte felt a traitorous flutter of hope. She'd always wanted Abigail's acceptance, even after years of torment.
I'd like that," Charlotte said carefully. "Wonderful!" Abigail's smile brightened. "Actually, I have something to show you. A surprise that might explain so much about your heritage, about why you're so powerful." Against Lucy's muttered protests, Charlotte followed Abigail through the corridors toward the old archives. The deeper they went, the more isolated they became, until Charlotte could barely hear the sounds of pack life above. "Abigail, where are we going?" "Just a little further. Trust me." Trust. Such a simple word, but it felt like swallowing glass. Still, Charlotte followed, hope warring with instinct in her chest. The archives were dark, dusty, filled with the musty scent of old parchment and forgotten secrets. Abigail led her to a far corner where ancient family records were stored, her movements oddly confident for someone who'd never shown interest in pack history. "Here," Abigail said, pulling out a leather-bound journal. "Your grandmother's diary. I found it while helping organize the old records." Charlotte's breath caught. Anything about her grandmother, about the family history her parents had died protecting, was precious beyond measure. She reached for the journal with trembling hands. The blow came from behind. Pain exploded across the back of Charlotte's skull as something heavy connected with bone. The world tilted, colors bleeding together as she crashed to the floor. Through the haze of agony, Charlotte heard Abigail's voice, cold, satisfied, nothing like the false warmth from moments before. "Finally, do you know how long I've waited for this moment?" Charlotte tried to move, to speak, but her body wouldn't obey. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision as footsteps approached. Too many footsteps for just Abigail. "Is she unconscious?" A male voice, unfamiliar but carrying an authority that made Charlotte's wolf whimper in recognition.
"Nearly. The dose should keep her compliant for hours." Dose? Charlotte's mind struggled to process the implication. Drugged. She'd been drugged and beaten. "Excellent work," the male voice continued, and Charlotte's blood ran cold as she recognized it. Mateo, your loyalty will be rewarded when she's safely in Shadowfang territory. Just remember our deal. Abigail's voice was sharp with greed. When you claim her, I get her position in Moonvale. Elijah will need a new Luna, and I'm the obvious choice. Mateo's laughter was like breaking glass. Of course, though you might want to consider what kind of alpha claims his mate's sister so quickly after her disappearance. Charlotte wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything but lie helpless as they discussed her like a piece of property. But the drug in her system was winning, pulling her deeper into darkness. The last thing she heard was Mateo's satisfied voice. Load her into the wagon. By the time the Alpha King realizes she's gone, we'll be deep in Shadowfang territory, and the combat trial will be forfeit. Consciousness returned in fragments. The rumble of wheels over rough ground, the musty scent of burlap, the taste of blood and betrayal in her mouth. Charlotte kept her breathing steady, her body limp, while she assessed her situation. Her hands were bound, her wolf suppressed by whatever drug they'd given her. She could hear at least 3 heartbeats nearby, Mateo and 2 others, probably guards. But there was something else, a new awareness, a presence that felt both foreign and intimately connected to her. At first, she thought it might be the mate bond with Elijah, but this was different. Smaller, more fragile, more precious. The realization hit her like lightning. She was pregnant. The timing was impossible. Werewolf pregnancies didn't show signs this quickly, but the bond was unmistakable. A tiny spark of life nestled beneath her heart. Elijah's child, conceived in that moment when the curse had broken and their souls had touched. Terror and fierce protectiveness warred in her chest. She had to escape, had to protect this precious life. But how? She was drugged, bound, surrounded by enemies, and growing farther from Moonvale territory with each passing moment. A distant howl cut through the night air, long, mournful, filled with rage and desperation. Elijah had discovered she was missing. The wagon lurched to a sudden stop. "What is it?" Mateo's voice was sharp with tension. "Riders," one of the guards reported, "coming fast from the south." Another howl, closer this time, followed by the thunder of hooves. Charlotte's heart soared, even as her logical mind despaired. Elijah was coming for her, but he was racing into a trap. Mateo had chosen this route, this timing, for a reason. "How many?" Mateo demanded. 5, maybe 6. The Alpha King leads them. Mateo's laughter held no humor. "Perfect. Let him come. It's time to finish this permanently." The sound of steel being drawn filled the air. Charlotte realized with growing horror that this had never been about claiming her for Shadowfang. This was an assassination attempt, with her as both bait and witness. She had to warn him, had to do something. But as she struggled against her bonds, the drug pulled her back toward darkness. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was the clash of steel and Elijah's roar of fury as he discovered the trap waiting for him. When she woke again, she was no longer in the wagon. Charlotte found herself in a rough stone chamber lit by flickering torches. Her bonds had been replaced with iron shackles that burned against her skin, cold iron, the kind used to suppress werewolf abilities. But the drug had worn off enough for her to think clearly, and to feel the small, steady pulse of life within her with perfect clarity. Mateo sat across from her, his handsome face marred by fresh scratches and what looked like the beginning of a spectacular bruise. "You're awake. Good." He leaned forward, studying her with predatory interest. "Your mate proved surprisingly resourceful. We lost 3 warriors before managing to escape." "Is he?" The words stuck in her throat. "Alive? Yes, though I suspect he's quite worried about you." "Don't worry. This separation won't last long. just until the combat trial deadline passes and your mate bond is considered broken by forfeit. That's not how mate bonds work, Charlotte said hoarsely. Isn't it? According to the ancient laws I've studied, prolonged separation without consummation can dissolve even a true mate bond, especially if one party willingly chooses another. His eyes glittered with dark promise. And you will choose me, Charlotte, eventually. Never! We'll see. He rose, moving toward the door. You have 3 days to consider your options. Your pack believes you're dead. Abigail was quite convincing in her grief when she reported finding your bloody dress by the river. Elijah is planning your funeral. The words hit her like physical blows. Dead? They thought she was dead? But don't despair, Mateo continued conversationally. I'll make sure he learns the truth right after you bear my heir and seal our bond permanently. He left her alone with that promise, and Charlotte finally allowed herself to break down. Tears came in violent sobs as the full weight of her situation crashed over her. Betrayed by family, captured by enemies, pregnant with a child whose father thought she was dead. But as her hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach, something hardened in her chest. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. I'll protect you, she whispered, to the tiny life growing within her. Whatever it takes, I'll find a way to protect you. Outside her cell, thunder rumbled across the mountains, and Charlotte could swear she heard an answering howl carried on the wind. Somewhere out there, Elijah was looking for her. The question was, would he find her before it was too late for them all? Chapter 5. The Omega Who Became Queen. The rescue came like thunder in the night. Charlotte woke to the sound of stone crumbling and Elijah's roar of fury echoing through the Shadowfang stronghold. Her heart soared, even as her terror gripped her. He'd found her, but at what cost? Move! Mateo's voice cut through the chaos as he burst into her cell, iron key in hand. My armies aren't ready. We retreat to the northern stronghold. But before he could reach her shackles, the cell door exploded inward. Elijah stood in the smoking doorway like an avenging god, his eyes blazing with wolf-light, and something far more dangerous, the protective fury of a mate who thought his beloved was dead. Get away from her, he snarled, power rolling off him in waves. Mateo smiled, though Shadow could smell his fear. Too late, Elijah. She carries mine. The quiet certainty in Elijah's voice stopped Mateo cold. My child, my mate, mine. The word hit Charlotte like a physical caress. In all her doubts about his motivations, she'd never heard him claim her with such absolute conviction. The fight was brief and brutal. Mateo was strong, but Elijah was fighting for everything that mattered. Within moments, the Shadowfang Alpha was unconscious on the stone floor, and Elijah was breaking her shackles with his bare hands. Charlotte, he breathed, gathering her against his chest. I thought I'd lost you. When I saw the blood by the river... Abigail, Charlotte whispered, and saw understanding flash in his eyes. I know. We found her correspondence with Mateo after you vanished. She's been dealt with. Charlotte didn't ask what that meant. Some betrayals deserved whatever justice they received. But as Elijah carried her from that nightmare, Charlotte realized their troubles had only begun, because the moment they returned to Moonvale territory, everything changed. The pregnancy could no longer be hidden, not when every wolf with enhanced senses could detect the growing life within her. And with that revelation came a shift in the very fabric of werewolf society. A child born of curse breaking,
Henry murmured, his scholarly excitement barely contained as he examined ancient texts in the Great Hall. Conceived at the moment of the curse's destruction, there are prophecies about such births. Charlotte sat beside Elijah on the twin thrones that had been hastily constructed, another change that still felt surreal. 3 weeks ago, she'd been the Pax Omega. Now she wore a crown and commanded the respect of wolves who'd once tormented her. But with power came enemies. "My queen," Hudson reported, his expression grim. "Scouts report movement from 3 neighboring territories. Mila has been seen meeting with the dissatisfied wolves from our own pack." "Let me guess," Charlotte said wearily. "They object to an Omega on the throne." "They object to change," Elijah corrected, his hand finding hers. "Some wolves prefer the old ways, where bloodlines mattered more than worth." But Charlotte knew better. It wasn't just about tradition. It was about fear. Fear of what she represented, what her child might become. The first prophecy had come from an ancient seer in the Eastern Territories. When the cursed king finds his light, their union shall birth either salvation or endless night. The second had been found in the Moonville archives, written in her own grandmother's hand. "The child of curse and blessing shall rise when the realm bleeds. They will either heal the wounds between the packs or tear them asunder forever." And now, as Charlotte placed her hand on her still small belly, a third prophecy had emerged from the lips of every oracle across the werewolf realm. Her kiss freed the king, but her child will either save the realm or destroy it. "Cheerful," Charlotte muttered, earning a weak smile from Elijah. "Prophecies are rarely encouraging," he agreed. "They're meant to warn, not comfort." But warnings had power, and across the territories, that power was mobilizing armies. Mateo had escaped during a prisoner transfer, rallying not just Shadowfang wolves, but mercenaries from the wildlands who cared nothing for prophecy and everything for the coin he offered. His message was simple: capture the Omega Queen and her unborn child and control the future of all werewolves. Mila's rebellion was more insidious. She moved through the territories like poison, whispering to the traditionalists, the fearful, the jealous. Her message was equally simple. The Omega's child was an abomination that would bring only destruction. Better to eliminate the threat before it could be born. 17 packs have declared neutrality, Hudson reported during their daily briefing. 8 have openly sided with our enemies, and 3, he hesitated. 3, Elijah prompted. 3 have sent assassins. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Charlotte felt the baby flutter within her, the first true movement she'd felt, and fierce protectiveness overwhelmed her fear. "Double the guards," she commanded, her voice carrying new authority. "No one approaches the royal quarters without being thoroughly searched." "Charlotte," Elijah began. "No." She turned to face him, and he saw something new in her eyes. Not the frightened Omega he'd first met, but a queen who would burn the world to protect her child. "I won't cower while they hunt my baby. If they want a war, they'll get one." The transformation was remarkable. In the weeks that followed, Charlotte evolved from protected mate to co-ruler with terrifying efficiency. She studied military strategy with Hudson, learned pack law from Henry, and trained her growing power with ancient techniques Lucy discovered in forgotten texts. But it was her connection to the common wolves that truly established her reign. Where Elijah ruled through strength and fear, Charlotte governed through understanding and compassion. She remembered what it felt like to be powerless, and she ensured no wolf under her protection would suffer as she had. "The people love her," Hudson observed one evening, watching Charlotte mediate a dispute between rival wolf families in the Great Hall. "Even the traditionalists are beginning to accept her authority." "She was born to rule," Elijah replied, pride evident in his voice. "I just gave her the throne she deserved." But not everyone was impressed by her growing influence. "She's dangerous,"
Mila declared to her gathered conspirators in a hidden cave deep in neutral territory. Look how she's changed, from Omega to Queen in mere weeks? That's not natural. That's dark magic. The assembled wolves, outcasts from various packs, traditionalists who'd fled rather than bow to an Omega, mercenaries looking for profit, murmured agreement. The child will be worse, continued Marcus, one of Elijah's former advisors who'd been stripped of rank for speaking against Charlotte's coronation. A being conceived in the breaking of ancient magic? It will have power beyond comprehension, power that could reshape the werewolf world. Or destroy it, Mila added with vicious satisfaction. The prophecies are clear. This child could be our salvation or our damnation. Are we willing to bet the fate of all werewolves on an Omega's bastard? Meanwhile, in his northern stronghold, Mateo was having similar conversations with very different allies. The child will be immensely powerful, he explained to the gathered warlords from the lawless territories. Whoever controls it controls the future of our kind. Imagine an army led by a being who can break curses, who carries the bloodlines of both cursed king and ancient power. And if the prophecies are true, asked Crave, a scarred warrior whose pack had been exiled for practicing forbidden magic. If the child brings destruction? Mateo's smile was cold as winter. Then we make sure we're on the winning side of that destruction. Back in Moonvale, Charlotte felt the weight of these schemes pressing against her like the physical force. Every day brought new reports of armies gathering, of alliances forming, of the werewolf realm choosing sides for a war that would determine everything. But it was the personal betrayals that cut deepest. Lucy found her in the gardens one evening, staring up at the full moon with tears tracking down her cheeks. "What's wrong?" her friend asked gently. "I received letters today. From wolves I helped when I was nobody. Families I fed when they were starving. Children I protected from bullies." She held up a stack of parchment. "They're begging me to abdicate, to leave peacefully and take my cursed child with me before it brings doom to the realm." Lucy's face darkened with anger. "Ungrateful." "No." Charlotte shook her head. "They're scared, and maybe they're right to be. What if the prophecies are true? What if my child does bring destruction?" "Then you'll face it together." Elijah's voice came from behind them. He'd been listening, his expression soft with understanding. "But I don't believe the prophecies tell the whole story." "Why not?" "Because they don't account for love." He sat beside her, pulling her against his side. Every prophecy speaks of power, of salvation or destruction. None of them mention that this child will be raised by two parents who would die before letting harm come to anyone under their protection. Charlotte leaned into his warmth, drawing strength from his certainty. "I'm scared, Elijah." "Good. Fear keeps you careful, but don't let it make you weak." His hand covered hers on her belly. "This child is part of both of us. Whatever power it has, whatever destiny awaits, we'll face it together." But even as he spoke those reassuring words, drums began to echo across the valley. War drums, calling the scattered armies to battle. Charlotte gasped, her hand flying to her stomach as she felt it, the first real movement of her child. Not a flutter, but a definite kick, as if the baby was responding to the sound of approaching war. "It's starting," she whispered, not sure if she meant the battle or something else entirely. Around them, the drums grew louder, And Charlotte realized that whatever came next would determine not just the fate of the werewolf realm, but the very nature of the child growing within her. In the distance, howls began to rise, some calling for war, others for peace, all of them converging on Moonvale territory where forgotten Omega had become a queen, and where her unborn child would either unite the packs forever or tear them apart in ways that could never be healed. The final battle for the future of all werewolves was about to begin. Thank you so much for staying with me right to the end of the story. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. If you enjoyed Charlotte and Elijah's journey, don't forget to like this video and share it with a friend who loves werewolf romance too. And of course, I want to hear your thoughts. Share your opinions below, and I'll see you in the next story.